I used to think my life was simple. We're lucky, I told Lena one night, holding the phone close. Not everyone gets this kind of love. She laughed softly and said, "You always say that." I said, "Because it's true. You're my future." I was engaged, stable, and sure of myself. I believed loyalty mattered more than passion. "I don't need excitement," I told my friend once. "I need trust." Lena agreed every time. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "Neither are you." I believed her without question. Work was my battlefield. I stayed late, skipped weekends, and chased promotions. "Why push so hard?" Lena asked during dinner. I said, "So we can buy the house you want." She squeezed my hand. "Then I'll wait." Those words kept me moving. When the overseas offer came, I hesitated. 2 years is a long time, my mother said over tea. Mrs. Chow watched me carefully. "Money isn't everything." I answered, "This isn't just money. It's security." Lena nodded fast. "I can handle distance," she said. "Go. I'll be here." I trusted her because I wanted to. I trusted myself because I had never failed her. "We'll video call every day," I said. "We'll plan the wedding while I'm gone." She smiled. "You worry too much." I laughed and said, "That's my job." Mr. Han drove me everywhere. He had been with me for 5 years. "Your family," I told him once. He waved it off. "I just do my job." I said, "No, you do more than that." He drove Lena when I was busy. He helped my mother with groceries. I never checked twice. The night before my flight, we ate together. My mother said, "Call me when you land." I said, "I always do." Lena said, "Text me first." Mr. Han waited outside. Everything felt normal. That should have scared me. I packed quietly. Lena leaned on the door. "You'll be back before you know it," she said. I answered, "I'll come back better." She hugged me tight. "Don't forget us." I joked, "How could I?" At the airport, my mother hugged me longer than usual. "If something feels wrong," she whispered, "come home." I smiled. "Nothing will be wrong." Lena kissed my cheek. "Make us proud." I said, "I'm doing this for you." On the way to the airport, Lena said, "Promise me you won't change." I asked, "Change how?" She replied, "Don't forget why you're doing this." I said, "I know exactly why." She looked at me and said, "Say it." I answered, "Because I love you." She smiled, but her eyes moved away. I talked too much that morning. "I'll send money every month," I said. "You handle the planner. Pick the colors." Lena laughed. "You sound like my husband already." I said, "That's the plan." My mother listened and stayed quiet. In the car, I told Mr. Han, "Watch over them." He said, "You can trust me." I replied, "I know." I didn't ask questions. I didn't set rules. Trust felt easier than caution. At the terminal gate, Lena asked, "Are you scared?" I said, "Only of wasting time." She said, "Time changes people." I shook my head. "Not us." She whispered, "I hope so." I kissed her forehead and said, "Hope isn't needed when there's trust." As I waited, I messaged Lena, "First call tonight." She replied, "I'll be free." I messaged my mother, "I love you." She replied, "Be safe." Simple words, strong words. I held on to them like anchors. When the plane door closed, I took a breath and told myself, this is the right choice. I believed it completely. I smiled, closed my eyes, and trusted everything I was leaving behind. I was brushing my teeth when my phone vibrated. Motion detected. Living room, the app said. I laughed and muttered, probably the curtains. I wiped my mouth and opened the app without thinking. Just noise, I told myself. The screen loaded slowly. "Come on," I whispered. Then I saw my front door open. Lena walked in. I smiled at first. "You're early," I said to the empty room. Then Mr. Han followed her inside. My hand froze. "Why are you with him?" I whispered. The camera caught their voices clearly. Lena laughed and said, "You locked it again." Mr. Han replied, "Old habit. He likes things neat." My stomach dropped. I leaned closer to the screen. "This isn't real," I said. Lena kicked off her shoes. "He won't check tonight," she said. Mr. Han answered, "You sure?" She said, he trusts us. That word hit me hard. I shook my head and said, no, no. My heart started racing. Mr. Hand said, I feel bad sometimes. Lena laughed. Don't. He chose work over home. I whispered, I chose you. They moved toward the couch. I felt my hands shaking. Stop, I said to the screen. Mr. Hand said, what if he finds out? Lena replied, he won't. He never looks back. I replayed that line again and again. I paused the video and stayed at the frozen image. Say it's fake, I told myself. I pressed play. Lena said, you worry too much. Mr. Hand said, I just don't want trouble. She said, relax. I handle him. I felt something crack inside me. I replayed the footage from the start. Maybe I missed something, I said. I watched her enter again. I watched him follow again. Nothing changed. My chest felt tight. 5 years, I whispered. 5 years of trust. I sat on the bed and kept watching. Mr. Hand said, you deserve better. Lena answered, he gives me money, not time. I laughed once, sharp and broken. I gave you everything, I said. My voice sounded strange to me. I checked the timestamp. Midnight. I was calling you, I said softly. The memory hit me. I remembered her saying, I'm tired tonight. I remembered saying, sleep well. I closed my eyes and opened them again. They talked about normal things. Groceries. My mother. The house. Lena said, your cooking is better than his. Mr. Hand laughed. Don't let him hear that. I whispered, you both already said wise. I dropped the phone on the bed and stood up. My breathing was loud in my ears. Think, I told myself. Don't explode. I picked up the phone again and watched the last part. I didn't want to, but I did. When the screen finally went dark, I sat there in silence. So this is it, I said. My chest hurt, but no tears came. I felt empty and heavy at the same time. I pressed my hand to my face and stayed still. I didn't call Lena. I didn't message Mr. Han. I stayed at the wall and listened to my breathing. Calm down, I whispered. Rushing won't fix this. My heart still raced, but my mind slowed. I thought about trust. I thought about loyalty. I was stupid, I said. Then I shook my head. No, I was honest. I replayed the video one last time, then locked the app. I saw enough. I lay back and closed my eyes. I won't forgive this, I whispered. Then I added, but I won't rush either. I woke up and called Lena like always. Did you sleep well? I asked. She yawned and said, not really. I waited for your call. I said, sorry, work ran late. She replied, you always say that. I smiled and answered, because it's always true. I listened carefully. What are you doing now? I asked. She said, having breakfast. I checked the time at home. So early. I asked. She laughed. I couldn't sleep. I said, you should rest more. She said, you worry too much. I pressed record and stayed quiet. Every call was the same. I miss you, she said. I answered, me too. She said, when are you coming back? I replied, soon. I never asked who she was with. I never accused. Silence felt safer. At work, Maya leaned over my desk. You look tired, she said. I shrugged. Long nights. She studied my face. That's not just work. I said, it's nothing. She replied, that's what people say when it's something. We ate lunch together. Maya asked, want to talk? I said, if I do, I won't stop. She nodded. Then start. I said, I saw something I can't unsee. She asked, did it break you? I answered, not yet. She said, good. Don't let it. That night, Lena called again. Why are you so quiet? She asked. I said, just tired. She replied, you sound distant. I said, distance does that. She laughed. You promised distance wouldn't change us. I answered, I remember. After the call, I saved the recording. I labeled it with the date. One step at a time, I told myself. I checked the CCTV again. New clips appeared. Same faces. Same lies. I saved everything. Maya messaged me. Still awake? She asked. I replied, yeah. She said, thinking. I answered, learning. She sent, "That's better than drowning." I typed, "I'm trying not to react." She replied, "Reaction is what they expect." The next day, I checked my bank records. "Why is this charge, hey?" I muttered. I followed the trail. Gas, restaurants, gifts, all on days I wasn't home. "You used my money," I said quietly. My hand stopped shaking. I called Lena again. "Did you need more money?" I asked casually. She said, "Why?" I replied, "I saw extra spending." She paused, then said, "Prices went up." I said, "That makes sense." It didn't. Maya watched me closely. "Yo karma," she said. I answered, "Because I see clearly." She asked, "What do you want?" I said, "Control." She nodded. "Then keep watching." I stopped asking questions. I stopped explaining myself. I listened. I recorded. I saved. Each line made my mind steadier. "You're different," Lena said one night. I replied, "I'm growing." She said, "I don't like that tone." I answered, "You don't hear it clearly." I told Maya, "I used to feel stupid." She said, "You weren't." I said, "I was blind." She replied, "Now you're observant." I smiled for the first time in days. That feels powerful. I sat alone and reviewed everything. Times, voices, money, patterns. "This isn't chaos," I whispered. "It's a system." My pain felt sharp but clean. No panic, no tears. That night, Lena said, "Promise me you trust me." I answered, "I trust what I see." She laughed nervously. "You're joking." I said, "Maybe." I ended the call and closed my laptop. I'm not the victim anymore, I told myself. I'm the one watching now. I landed without telling anyone. Surprise trips are cheaper, I told myself as I walked out of the airport. Mr. Han was waiting. "You're early," he said, too quickly. I smiled. Work ended faster. He nodded and avoided my eyes. I noticed. At home, Lena froze when she saw me. "You didn't say you were coming," she said. I answered, "I wanted to see your face." She laughed, nervous. "You scared me." I replied, "Did I?" She hugged me, stiff and careful. That night, I met Jason. "Don't act," he said over coffee. "Observe." I asked, "Legally?" He said, "Protect yourself. Evidence first. Emotions later." I nodded. "I can do quiet." He replied, "Quiet wins." At dinner, Lena said, "You look tired." I answered, "Jet lag." She said, "Mr. Han drove me today." I looked up. "Where?" She paused. "The market." Mr. Han said, "Yes, the market." I smiled. "Which one?" Silence followed. Later, Lena said, "Did you check your phone?" I said, "Why?" She shrugged. "Just asking." I watched her fingers shake. "You deleted something," I thought, but I said nothing. The next morning, Mr. Han said, "I'll clean the car." I replied, "No rush." He said, "I insist." I said, "All right." He left too fast. I checked the garage camera. "You're nervous," I whispered. Jason called. "Anything obvious?" he asked. I said, "Too obvious." He said, "Good. Let them trip." I answered, "They already are." He said, "Then wait." Lena talked too much now. "I missed you," she said. I replied, "I'm here." She said, "Forever." I smiled. "For now." She laughed, but her eyes searched my face. I checked the bank again. More charges. Gifts. I muttered. Lena said, "What?" I replied, "Nothing." She said, "You're acting strange." I answered, "Am I?" She said, "A little." I said, "Maybe I'm paying attention." Mr. Han avoided me. "You don't talk much," I said. He replied, "I don't want to disturb you." I said, "You never worried before." He forced a smile. People change. I thought, so do liars. At lunch, Lena said, "Let's plan the wedding." I looked up slowly. "Now." She said, "Why not?" I answered, "We have time." She said, "I want security." I thought, "You already took it." Jason messaged me. "Still calm." I typed, "Too calm." He replied, That's control. I typed, or numb. He sent, use it. That evening, Lena said, you trust me, right? I answered, I trust patterns. She frowned. That's a strange answer. I said, you asked a strange question. She laughed, forced and loud. I watched them make mistakes. Different stories. Missing receipts. Quick glances. You're unraveling, I thought. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt distance. Alone, I asked myself, do I want revenge? I answered, I want truth. I asked, do I want to hurt them? I said, I want peace. The answer surprised me. Before bed, Lena said, when we're married, things will settle. I looked at her and realized something clear. You think I'm blind, I thought. I smiled and said, we'll see. I didn't touch them directly. I touched the threads around them. People fall when they pull too hard, I told myself. I sent the report anonymously and closed my laptop. That's all, I whispered. No more. 2 days later, Mr. Han knocked on my door. There's a problem, he said. I asked, what kind? He swallowed. The company is checking accounts. I said, why? He said, someone reported misuse. I nodded. That happens. He paced and said, they asked about fuel charges. I replied, were they wrong? He froze. No, I said, then tell the truth. He looked at me like I had betrayed him. You're calm, he said. I answered, I don't steal. That night, Lena came home late. Work is crazy, she said. I asked, how? She dropped her bag. People are talking. I said, about what? She hesitated. Mistakes. I replied, whose? She said, mine, apparently. The next morning, Lena cried on the phone. Director Ju wants to see me, she said. I asked, why? She sniffed. He thinks I lied on a report. I said, did you? Silence followed. They misunderstood, she said. I answered, that happens too. When she came back, her eyes were red. He looked at me like I was nothing, she said. I asked, what did he say? She replied, that trust is hard to rebuild. I nodded. He's right. She stayed at me, searching. Jason called. It's moving, he said. I asked, clean. He replied, no trace to you. I said, good. He paused. How do you feel? I answered, empty. He said, that's normal. I wasn't sure. Mr. Han stopped driving me. Suspended, he muttered. I said, temporarily. He shook his head. They are auditing everything. I replied, audits find facts. He snapped, you sound like them. I said, facts don't shout. Lena clung to me now. Don't leave, she said one night. I asked, why would I? She said, everything feels unstable. I answered, stability comes from honesty. She cried harder and said, I need you. I held her and felt nothing. This isn't victory, I thought. It's erosion. Watching them fall didn't feel powerful. It felt quiet and cold. I told myself, this is karma, not revenge. Director Ju called her again. I heard her say, I swear I didn't mean to mislead. He replied, intent doesn't erase damage. She said, I've worked so hard. He answered, work without integrity is noise. The call ended. She looked at me and said, they don't trust me anymore. I replied, trust is fragile. She asked, do you still? I said, I'm listening. She didn't understand the answer. Mr. Han sent me a message. Can you help? He wrote. I typed, with what? He replied, they might press charges. I stayed at the screen. Actions have weight. I typed back. He didn't reply. Jason asked, still holding back? I said, yes. He said, why? I answered, because ending them won't heal me. He paused. Then finish this your way. Lena held my arm and whispered, we should get married soon. I looked at her and saw fear, not love. She still thinks I see nothing, I realized. I smiled gently and said, let's wait. I didn't touch them directly. I touched the threads around them. People fall when they pull too hard, I told myself. I sent the report anonymously and closed my laptop. That's all, I whispered. No more. 2 days later, Mr. Han knocked on my door. There's a problem, he said. I asked, what kind? He swallowed. The company is checking accounts. I said, why? He said, someone reported misuse. I nodded. That happens. He paced and said, they asked about fuel charges. I replied, were they wrong? He froze. No, I said, then tell the truth. He looked at me like I had betrayed him. You're calm, he said. I answered, I don't steal. That night, Lena came home late. Work is crazy, she said. I asked, how? She dropped her bag. People are talking. I said, about what? She hesitated. Mistakes. I replied, whose? She said, mine, apparently. The next morning, Lena cried on the phone. Director Jew wants to see me, she said. I asked, why? She sniffed. He thinks I lied on a report. I said, did you? Silence followed. They misunderstood, she said. I answered, that happens too. When she came back, her eyes were red. He looked at me like I was nothing, she said. I asked, what did he say? She replied, that trust is hard to rebuild. I nodded. He's right. She stayed at me, searching. Jason called. It's moving, he said. I asked, clean. He replied, no trace to you. I said, good. He paused. How do you feel? I answered, empty. He said, that's normal. I wasn't sure. Mr. Han stopped driving me. Suspended, he muttered. I said, temporarily. He shook his head. They are auditing everything. I replied, audits find facts. He snapped, you sound like them. I said, facts don't shout. Lena clung to me now. Don't leave, she said one night. I asked, why would I? She said, everything feels unstable. I answered, stability comes from honesty. She cried harder and said, I need you. I held her and felt nothing. This isn't victory, I thought. It's erosion. Watching them fall didn't feel powerful. It felt quiet and cold. I told myself, this is karma, not revenge. Director Jew called her again. I heard her say, I swear I didn't mean to mislead. He replied, intent doesn't erase damage. She said, I've worked so hard. He answered, work without integrity is noise. The call ended. She looked at me and said, they don't trust me anymore. I replied, trust is fragile. She asked, do you still? I said, I'm listening. She didn't understand the answer. Mr. Han sent me a message. Can you help? He wrote. I typed, with what? He replied, they might press charges. I stayed at the screen. Actions have weight. I typed back. He didn't reply. Jason asked, still holding back? I said, yes. He said, why? I answered, because ending them won't heal me. He paused. Then finish this your way. Lena held my arm and whispered, we should get married soon. I looked at her and saw fear, not love. She still thinks I see nothing, I realized. I smiled gently and said, let's wait. I said, sit down. Lena looked confused and asked, why are you so serious? I said, because I saw everything. She laughed once and said, you're scaring me. I replied, the CCTV doesn't lie. Her face went pale. She whispered, you watched. I nodded. Every second. She stood up and said, it's not what you think. I asked, what should I think? She cried, I was lonely. I answered, I was working. She said, you were never here. I replied, I was always choosing us. She said, I felt invisible. I answered, you made me disappear. She covered her face and said, I didn't plan it. I said, you repeated it. She grabbed my arm. Please don't leave. I pulled back. Let go. She said, I made a mistake. I replied, you made a choice. She said, he meant nothing. I answered, then why did you protect him? She cried harder. I needed comfort. I said, you needed honesty. She whispered, I was weak. I replied, weakness doesn't erase betrayal. She said, I still love you. I answered, love doesn't look like this. She fell to the floor and said, tell me how to fix it. I shook my head. You can't. She said, I'll do anything. I replied, you already did. My voice stayed calm. That scared her more. Later, Mr. Han came to see me. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said. I asked, then why did you? He said, it just happened. I replied, so did the consequences. He said, we're human. I answered, humans choose. He said, you were gone. I replied, that wasn't permission. He said, she needed someone. I answered, she needed loyalty. He looked down. I regret it. I said, regret is late honesty. He asked, can you forgive us? I said, no. He said, you're cold. I replied, I'm clay. He said, you're destroying everything. I answered, you already did. Lena followed me to the door. Say something, she begged. I said, I already said enough. She said, yell at me. I replied, I won't. She said, hit me. I answered, I'm done hurting. She cried, I can change. I said, change yourself, not my mind. She said, I'm sorry. I replied, sorry doesn't rewind time. She said, I was afraid. I answered, so was I. I picked up my bag. Where are you going? She asked. I said, away from lies. She said, you're punishing me. I replied, I'm choosing peace. She said, I'll wait. I answered, don't. At the door, I stopped. I saw everything, I said quietly. I felt everything. She whispered, then why are you so calm? I looked at her and said, because anger keeps you connected. I opened the door. As I walked out, I realized something simple and final. Silence would hurt them more than my rage ever could. I sold the house quietly. The agent asked, any reason for the rush? I said, I don't live there anymore. She nodded like she understood. I packed only what mattered and left the rest behind without regret. My mother watched me fold clothes. You're really going, she said. I answered, yes. She asked, for how long? I said, this time, permanently. She sighed and said, does it hate? I replied, less than staying. She poured tea and said, you don't talk about her. I said, I don't need to. She looked at me and asked, did you forgive them? I shook my head. I released them. She smiled softly. That's stronger. At the airport, she hugged me. You did your best, she said. I answered, I finally believe that. She whispered, be proud of who you are. I said, I am now. We didn't cry. On the plane, I deleted numbers. Lena, Mr. Han, old messages, old photos. I didn't hesitate. Some doors don't need closure, I told myself. They need distance. I turned my phone off and slept. Weeks later, someone mentioned Lena. She left her job, a voice said. I nodded once. People fall when lies run out. Someone else said, your driver is in trouble. I replied, actions echo. I felt nothing sharp. A colleague asked, do you regret not exposing them? I thought and said, no. He asked, why? I answered, I didn't want to stay tied to them. He nodded. That's Ray. I smiled. It's peaceful. In my new office, my boss said, we're glad you're staying. I replied, so am I. He said, fresh start. I answered, clear start. He laughed. Even better. At night, I walked alone through streets I didn't know. A stranger asked, are you lost? I said, no. That surprised me. I wasn't lost. I was free from expectations I never questioned before. I talk to myself more now. What do you want? I asked. The answer came easy. Stability without fear. I asked, love? I paused. Only if it's honest. I felt calm saying that. One evening, I looked at the skyline and said, you didn't destroy me. I meant betrayal. You stripped illusions. I breathed deeply. You forced me to choose myself. The words felt steady and true. I stopped chasing explanations. I stopped replaying footage. I stopped asking why. Why keeps you trapped, I realized. What's next moves you forward. I focused on what I could build. I learned to sit with silence without filling it. I learned that loyalty to myself mattered. You stayed calm, I told my reflection. You didn't beg. The man looking back seemed stronger. A message came from my mother. Are you happy? She asked. I typed, I'm clear. She replied, that's enough. I smiled and put the phone down. Standing in a new city, under unfamiliar lights, I felt whole. No anger, no hunger for revenge, just direction. Betrayal didn't break me, I said aloud. It rebuilt me from the ground.